Never mind.
So if you had a chance to look at that, just to summarize for everybody's benefit, the first three paragraphs. So we were, I think I'll let Brandy do the first three paragraphs. She was associated with the county and has a better handle on the bigger picture.
So the first month of the sales tax was in July and it's now being collected in October. So the first month was $805,000. If you annualize that out, that's 9.6 million. The property tax levy was 10.9 million. So that leaves an annual shortfall of $1.3 million. What was expected instead of 9.6 million was 12 to 14 million. Or in some cases, like on the county's FAQ, it was 12 to 13 million. So like I said, the staff had presented the concept of 12 to 13 million, but the difference is in the county staff's calculations, they included two different sales tax funds, the STP.
Vehicles.
One included prescriptions and one included vehicle sales, and so they expected the mental health board sales tax to fall in between. But the mental health tax does not include either one of those. So that's why it came out to be less. So, you guys, it said see attached on there and we didn't attach it. Sorry about that. We do have from the Illinois Department of Revenue the 22, 23, and 24, what they would have estimated for the mental health board tax. And from 22 to 23, there was a 2.74% increase, and then for the next year it was 3.47. So even with those increases, the mental health sales tax is not going to get back up to that 10.9 property tax level for a while. And it won't get to the $12 million, obviously, for even longer. So the issue is,
What do we do?
what do we do?
What do we do?
What do we do this year?
What do we do this year, and then what do we do in future years? And this year, we're better off than we will be in future years because we have a savings account. There's money that we could use. There's property tax revenue that's already been levied that we're going to receive, plus the sales tax for 5 months. So we're good for this year. You have to decide as a board whether we're going to, how much we're going to fund of that. Are we going to fund the full amount that we projected to be budgeting, or are you going to flat fund this based on last year and try for the future? The problem is we're at the time of funding right now, as you know. So we laid out just brainstorming 4 options for you to discuss, and then you need to discuss the future. How are we going to correct this? If we start using our fund balance that we have now, our savings account, let's call it, which we can do, that will run out. There's no doubt that will run out at the pace of 3 or 4% increase of sales tax. It just has to happen. So we'll stop there. We won't go over the options that are in front of you. And I don't mean to step on the toes of these guys at all. It's your meeting.
Well, we have to decide what we want to do. If we give out our reserve funds and live up to our budget, like you said, or Brandy said, we won't have it next year. We just won't. I mean, we can fund, but we'd have to tell the agencies, you won't have it next year, because to get up to, it's my understanding, and I'll just throw this out, to get up to the almost $11 million, we won't get up there in property tax till 2028, because we're shorted.
Sales tax.
Sales tax, if I'm sorry, not property sales. And so, since we won't have that until that time, we have to decide what we want to do. I know what my thoughts are, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. So anybody that would like to talk or ask questions of our attorneys, because we need to decide where we're going with this. I mean, tomorrow night, we bring up the budget, and we decide whether we're gonna fund, and some of the things that you can fund is a one-time thing, like capital, or a program doesn't require. Allocations, I'm sorry, the allocations, not budget. So, but we can fund like one-time things. Okay. Carolyn, I should have turned you up.
Yep, we're good.
Is it-
I'm just gonna start with one question and then I'll have more later. But all you had done here is extrapolate the 805 times 12 months, correct? And isn't it true that the way the sales tax are done, that there's actually some lag in some of those numbers, that there actually may be additional sales tax that come in for that month?
Leo, you want to answer that? You talked to the state.
Yeah, the way the projections were done was not based on the 805 per se, but it was based on using the historical that we got from the Illinois Department of Revenue, the historical trends, and analyzing that. So that's where some of it was used.
I guess I was under the impression that using those numbers and using like the 0.3 or 3% increase, that it was closer to like 10 million.
Yes, it'll be closer to 10 million for fiscal year. It'll be $10 million is what we're estimating for fiscal year '25.
Okay.
Correct.
And that's just, so it's a little bit off of what these numbers are, just.
Correct. About
Finding
10
another
million.
350,000 there, so.
Right.
That's just my first question. I wanted to clarify that. It's going to actually be
10 million.
closer to 10. And
Right.
then the other part is that we are, because we do know those property tax numbers. So even with that 805, we're still on target to have an overlap of about $4 million.
No, that overlap of property tax, everyone's looking, are you talking about property tax or sales
Yeah.
tax?
Well, I mean,
Okay,
both
yeah,
overlap
I
of
think
property
people are
tax and
confused
sales.
about the property tax. The property tax that we just got in September is in our budget. So we're using those dollars. So that is part of the dollars that Melanie budgets for. It's in our budget already. So those, we don't consider that.
No, but we're still collecting then sales tax.
The
for
sales tax will be the
July,
overlap.
August,
Correct.
September, October,
Correct.
November,
Correct,
5 months.
correct.
So 5 times 800,000
32,
is,
3.2 million is what we'll have. And that's what we're going to be dipping into in the reserves because we're really short. So when you think about it, even if we flat fund all our providers, the flat funding came out to be about 9.5 million last year. So that's 9.5 million that we will, if that's what the board chooses to flat fund, that will be the client services budget. We'll have, again, some flexibility if you want to do a little more and entertain anything else. But the rest of the budget, which is not how the mental health board has budgeted in the past, the rest of the budget, all the administrative expenses, all of that will be under reserves. So we'll be using reserves.
I think I'm making it just a little more confusing at this point. I'm just, like, 5 times 800,000 is $4 million, correct? Okay, that's all I wanted to know. So we're going to have $4 million still,
Yes.
yeah,
Additional
overlap
reserve.
money. Okay, that was just kind of where I was at. So those numbers are still the same, which is what we had anticipated. So
Right.
those are my questions for now. I'll have more later.
Mike?
Thank you. This occurred as an honest mistake, and we only had partial information. Are we visiting rectifying that in any way? Or is it just this is the way it is?
From what I believe tonight, the purpose of today's meeting is twofold. We put it on there, is to decide on tomorrow night how we're going to budget the fiscal year '25 budget. That is one. And second is your second question is, strategies for the future. What are we looking at for the future? Because it's not sustainable. As everybody knows, this has been a disappointment, I think, for everyone involved in this movement, including all the county board members that were, part of this. So this has been, I think, a surprise for everyone of where we're at.
But can it be fixed?
That'll be something that we can, we'll have enough time on this flat budget to work with the county and collaborate, but it's up to this board on what direction you want us to look at. We'll have time to talk about it, but, we are getting some ideas tonight.
Okay.
The answer is maybe.
Maybe. How about go back to the property tax then and not take the
That's-
taxes because we bought into that without all the information?
That's a done deal, as I understand it, and the lawyers can correct me if I'm
It's
wrong.
very disappointing.
Yeah, it's a done deal. I mean, we're now in sales tax.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any? Okay, here we go. I know, I'm coming. I'm trying to find Jeray. I said next. Did you think, okay,
This is also going to have a further impact with regard to our investment income that we were talking with the treasurer's office.
we
So
won't be
have to-
doing that.
So we have to bear that in mind, that we were thinking we were going to have additional funds. As far as the sales tax, it's usually cyclical in nature. Has that been taken into account with the letter you were showing from the Department of Revenue? That I believe toward the end of the year, there's more sales tax collected because of the holidays and shopping and such?
Just a minute, please. Oh, Lindsay came on first.
The estimates by the Department of Revenue were annual, so it took that into effect. Or into account, I guess, not into effect.
Okay. Okay.
So your focus really needs to be on this year. What are we, you have to direct the staff as to what to do.
I know.
So I don't know if this question's gonna make any sense or not. We often talk about the differentiation between like grant funding, purchase of position, and fee-for-service, with the idea that if you have a fee-for-service agreement with us, you as an agency can come back to us later and say, we have delivered more service, therefore we need to have an additional allocation of funds. But if you have a grant, you can't do that. And so we're proposing flat funding a range of different programs with the idea that perhaps the county is going to be able to make revisions that would provide additional funding to us later on. We don't know, so we can't know right now. That's going to take time to figure it out. If they're on grant funding and we end up with additional allocations, are they able to reapply later for additional grant funding?
Do you want to answer that? I'll answer that. Usually not on a grant fund. Well, if, my thing is if we do flat funding and we have more money besides dipping in, we can always give more money, or we can fund one-time capital or one-time events. We can look at that. But usually not is the answer, but we can revisit that. Okay. Lindsay?
Yeah, thank you. Along those same lines of Mike's thought process, if I may extrapolate, I think in partnership with the county, they moved forward in good faith, all of us on the same page that more dollars, more services were needed, and I do hope and anticipate that that conversation will be ongoing and swift. With that said, I'm not sure that today we should make choices that we can't sustain. So I appreciate the 4 proposed concepts in the letter, and I, vote for number 1, but we can't make that happen overnight, and that, quite honestly, even our county board can't make that happen overnight, because that's, for the people of the county to have a voice in. So my thought process is, how do we do a good job of identifying where we can maintain the good programs that we've had, short of any of them that weren't functioning well or, weren't kind of meeting the needs that they thought they were going to meet? Where are there opportunities for capital investments and startup projects that know that they're never going to get more money? Where are there opportunities in our opioid fund dollars, especially some of what I call the surprise money that came from some of the pharmaceutical dollars? And, the answer to me is that we just don't have enough information right away. And like Chris, I hope that we can, craft a solution that might be unique this year to meet the needs of our, existed agencies and their funding. So I'm in favor of us looking at what we've done before, but also I don't want us to sit on a couple $1 million if we don't have to, if there are opportunities today to make investments in things that we have faith won't need those dollars in the future. And I think our staff do a great job of assessing those kinds of programs and projects. So, that's where my thought process is at. I also want to remind everybody that the last couple of years, we've put $900,000 and $1 million of our fund balance reserves into our actual budget. And this is going to come in shyer than what our previous property tax dollars were. So we're going to need every bit of that money. And while the nature is no matter what we put out there, some will come back, we're going to have to put more out there of our fund balance reserves than we did previously just to meet the minimum. So that money could go rapidly, I think. And, we need to be fiscally responsible to give it maybe a year or two to work whatever options are out there, because not everything can move on a timeline we want it to move on. So those are my thoughts. I hope to hear from staff, about any of those projects and opportunities and startups that we believe might only need 1 or 2 years of, money, because that's something we can do today, and I don't think we should sit on all of that money today.
I agree. Carolyn?
Okay, so I'll continue on with my conversation. First, I want to say, I do realize, this was disappointing for everyone. However, I want to look at it on the bright side, that it does actually give us autonomy from the county board. As far as, every year we were going back, asking for more money. It was extremely contentious last year, to the point where, it was actually potentially going in the opposite direction that we wanted it to go to. So I think what this does is it allows us to really control and project better for the future. So even though it may not be what we wanted this year, it does allow us to have the discussions at this board and have a plan at this board without having to kind of go back to the county board and hope for the best. So saying all of that, Lindsay made a lot of great points, starting with, this is 1 month that we've seen, 1 month of an incomplete number as well. I think, at least I knew that first year was going to be questionable. I mean, I think we always had talked about that overlap as being kind of a nice cushion, because we didn't know where this first year was really going to go. I also took a look at the most current numbers that we have on the FY25 budget, as well as our year-to-date as where we're at. And I know we always do some kind of reevaluation, and then there's always kind of money left over. And I kind of went through last year's too, and I don't mean to take this over as far as from anyone if anyone else ran numbers, I would love to hear them, because I find it pretty confusing to see what numbers last year allocated, what numbers were actually then revised and reallocated. And it appeared that there's probably about, $500,000 last year that were actually reallocated to others because certain service providers didn't use them for whatever reason. And my number may be different, but this is just my calculation. And again, I know we had a lot of administration where that had happened as well. And then when I was looking at the budget that we do, we actually use the last budget and not necessarily the current numbers. So when I then was looking at the most current numbers that we have and actually putting those to the FY25 budget versus the FY24 budget, I actually came up with, there's a little bit of overage. Like, I think we were, and I get it because I've budgeted, it's always nice to have a cushion. But my point being is either we could reevaluate that and go to a more realistic of actual 24 numbers, or we could just assume that there's going to be that cushion, and it would be nice to actually go more to the realistic. I mean, when I budgeted, and I know we don't have the luxury of being at the end of this fiscal year yet, but you usually would take then the actuals and then like budget off of those actuals and not necessarily off of what your FY25 actual approved budget approved was. So in just running those numbers, there's about like $179,000 in there that we could probably take off of the admin costs. And I mean, there's some programs I think we could, so that, looking at that, then we have the capital, the capital that we were talking about, which is like $350,000. I mean, if we wanted to do like half this year, half, we could adjust that, take off, let's say, another $150,000 in that. And then also included in that budget, and I don't know exactly if that was in the 12 million or if this is in a different number, was that rollover money, which was unknown. And I know we were just trying to put a placeholder there of that $650,000. So my point being, is there's still a lot of movement within this FY25 budget that actually, we would look at, okay, how do we reallocate it later? But just maybe in the reality of, we have it there, and maybe we just allocate it now, with the understanding of we're not going to have it to reallocate it later. So we could have two trains of thought, like, either we leave the cushion in there, and then when we want to reallocate, kind of how we've done in years past, knowing that we're going to have probably $650,000, or, I mean, I think we really could. If we really wanted to tighten these numbers, there's a lot. I don't know if staff wants to go through it, but there's a lot in here that could just be like tightened up to more actual numbers of today that's spent. And instead of just adding the, extra. And then I think decisions on capital project, do we want to do the capital projects or do we do some of it? I mean, I think that frees up some money. And then I agree with Lindsay on the new funding. I mean, I think that anything new that's going to be a continuing annual occurrence, I think we really need to hold off on those for this year. And then maybe ones that are startups that are very limited, we know it's going to be 6 months and done, or, a one-time, I'd be willing to discuss those again. But I do think there's some administrative movement, and I think there's some, some movement we can make with the allocation funding without being extreme on some of these. I would go over one. I don't think that is, I wouldn't even ask, because you know what, we'll be right back where we were a year ago with the county board if we went and asked that, in all honesty. The people have spoken, let's give it a year at least to absorb. And then I think number 4, I think honestly for relations, I think just flat out cutting those programs too, I just think it would be very vindictive. So I wouldn't support that one either. But I'm willing to have discussion in all those other areas. So thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. I just wanted to say, you're talking about the overall budget, which is great. I mean, I think right now what we're talking about is the allocation decisions for tomorrow, but I think that those are great feedbacks. I wrote it down. The staff would like to present, we will have to, once we decide what the allocations are going to be for tomorrow, we will have to make a decision regarding trimming down the budget and turning in a new budget to the county board and talking to county administration. If we had a special board meeting just for the budget So I know tomorrow night is our allocation decision, but just for the budget, because we do have to turn that back in, that November 6th could be a budget meeting, and we can talk through all those points that, so we can come up with a new budget after we decide on what to do with the allocations. So those are all great points, Carolyn, so thank you for that.
I think, I was just going to say, I think some of the capital is for this year, too. I mean, that we'll probably end up doing because we had requests from this year. And I don't want to confuse this year with next year. That's all I'm saying. Okay, okay. So, is there any other, just a second here?
Just a reminder, if your microphone's not on, it won't go into the record.
Okay, Lindsay first, and I'll get you.
I just wanted to kind of revisit some of the budget decisions that were made that I know I was a part of as talking with Melanie, who's not here, and Leo. Part of the reason we built in something like $650,000 of potential mid-year capital was because we were unsure about what the revenue was going to be. So we wanted to have that budgeted in as a buffer, knowing that maybe we wouldn't have that money at all if the sales tax kind of came down. So while I agree with the concepts of looking, into the opportunities of all of that, some of that was built in as safeguards, and we're like kind of beyond the safeguards that were built into that budget is my understanding of it. Where, whatever the budget is, we can make it lean, like you say, which I think we should. I think every year we build in a little bit of, I'm going to botch the line item, but sort of a little emergency buffer, dollars as well beyond that 650. And all of those things could go away because we know there's some return of money. We know we have a fund balance if there was a true emergency. So, I'm absolutely in favor of everything being as lean as it can be, and a reassessment of the administrative budget is in alignment with kind of what we're setting for our allocation budget. That makes sense to me. Still with that, I wanted to make a comment on what you said about the first and fourth on this list. I'm in agreement, that, I'd like to see where we could partner with them, where their opportunities are, but they need time too, right? Even if one of these was a realistic option, I really think this is all so last minute, and I would hate for anything to happen to any great programs that we have. And if it's ever a transition of funding source, that's great. Let's make that a collaborative effort so that it's streamlined and nothing happens. So once again, I think we're at the same point of it's not as bad, but we have to be fiscally responsible also to say that's going to go by fast. So, and even if you let that breathe for a year and then it's got to go up, and let's say they try to put another referendum up, there's no saying that it'll pass. We have, very few guarantees. I think one of the things I feel strongly about is I think we should continue, for our grant writer, because those are some things that are within our control to try to go after for adding additional funding sources. And those are some of the things in our administrative budget line items that I would want to make sure we didn't remove because they have the potential to be 1 + 1 = 10. So, but yeah, just as a concept of that, if we did a mid-year allocation or anytime anybody wants to come to us, I want to revisit what Chris said. We had a concept that was presented here and in the Finance Committee about a mid-year opportunity for capital projects and things like that. And I see no reason why this board shouldn't be in support of opportunities mid-year to look at all sorts of funded programs, and if there is a shortfall, of trying to prioritize in whatever way we see fit at that time. I don't want to see us have an administrative SOP kind of issue around that, where we're not allowing people to come back when they might really need it, especially if we are going to do something like flat fund. That's all we can do. I think we need to remain a little bit more creative this next fiscal year to meet the needs as the money comes in.
I agree with you. I think that it might have to be not just 6 months, it might be 3 months down the road, whatever. If we do flat funding, and I agree with you, Chris, we need to look at grants too, everything. I mean, we need to look at what we can do, but right now, maybe keep a flat budget. Greg? I'm going to try to get you. Did you hit your thing?
So
Go ahead.
the last thing you said is kind of what I wanted to address and explore. So if I understand your thought, if we flat fund, what I was going to propose was just philosophically a thought that these new programs that we're not going to fund would not be eligible, based on our past practice, would not be eligible to come in and ask if we suddenly had some more money than we thought, or we had some money, discretionary money. So I would say either we abandon that for this year, or if we have some we're passionate about, fund them a little bit so that they've got a foot in the door. And I don't have a strong feeling either way, but I think we need to allow ones that we thought were worthy, right, based on our initial thing, to be able to come in and have a second look.
I think
I don't know if we need to vote on that, or if it's just past practice that we can change our minds.
I think that we can do that. Right now, we're just deciding, tomorrow night, we do allocations. And are we going to do flat allocations but anytime we want people to be able to come back, whether it be a new program, an existing program, a grant program, we need to allow that. Go ahead, Greg. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. Well, I tried. There.
Since we're deciding allocations, I think they're interdependent thoughts. If we say we're flat funding on our allocations and we don't allow the new programs that we're not funding to come back, then it's kind of a catch-22. I think we need to decide if, as a policy, that before we make our allocation decisions, because what we decide may depend on the answer to that question. So I think we need a definitive consensus or something that folks that are new programs that are not funded will be able to come back.
Do you all agree to that? So the consensus is yes, unless somebody, Chris is going yes, and over here I see yes. So yes, the answer is yes. Amy, I'm sorry. There we go.
I just pressed it, so no apologies.
I forgot you, I just,
No, I just clicked in. I mean, clearly this, as has been said, this is very last minute. Everyone is sort of trying to figure things out. And as was said right at the beginning, the budgeting and allocations are right now, which is not desirable. Given some of the comments that have been made, particularly kind of taking off of some things that Carolyn said, and knowing that we have a fairly good standing reserve, I am comfortable leaving at the proposed 14.7 budget. I know that is big. I understand that is not sustainable. We do have some capital requests in there. We've mentioned that some fee-for-service comes back. I know that this might sound way too pie in the sky, but there's no reason we have to propose 14.7 or 15 next year. We can just honestly say it's smaller. We like to see it grow year over year, but I feel I don't want to do too much to shortchange the providers who are coming up with programs to serve our community. Ultimately, that's our job. And I don't know how much of a headache it is for them to have a greater budget in this year than they could possibly have next year. It might be smaller, just based on the reality. But I'm leaning a bit away from flat funding and more toward let's do what we thought we were going to be able to do since we have money in reserves. And then I did appreciate point number 4, not that I saw it as vindictive, and I'm not saying we should go for it and just cut everything that's county funded, but in the spirit of if folks are going to feel the pain, I want everybody to feel that pain, no matter whether it was a mistake or not. Ultimately, I don't want our community to suffer too much for it. So I'm not at all saying
That's your
just
thing.
cut them out, but I think that it is a consideration I had not thought of, where if we're all looking to find other money, then that should go to everyone. So those are my comments.
Our attorney wants to say something, and I'd like to say something to your point, so do you want to hit your,
I did.
okay.
So, on the first point, we did discuss before the meeting, not flat funding and going up to 13 or 14 million or whatever it was. But if you do that, if that's what the group decides, make sure you document to the funded agencies that you're giving it to that this might just be one time, and fully explain this might not happen again, so don't get into a long-term program type of expense. And that's where the idea of capital expenditure or a one-time expense came up, so that was a good idea. Point number 4 wasn't brought up. We would never do that, trying to be vindictive or anything like that. We were trying to brainstorm how to make corrections, and we can't go back to the property tax. We can't increase just with a wave of the wand the sales tax. We can't correct the problem quickly, so we looked at a way of using the county's funding for our benefit, and we came up with the concept of, well, we're funding the county, maybe they could fund some of that with us, and then that'll help alleviate. It doesn't help that much. It's between $500,000 and $700,000, depending on how you look at it, but it would certainly help. It was just an idea, that's all. It wasn't meant to be vindictive.
Okay, I'd like to say something to your point. I know that it's hard for agencies, I've been on that side, when you fund a new program and a year later say, sorry, you can't, you've got all those parents, I'm just saying it, all those parents, all those children, all those adults that have developmental disability, whatever it is, very angry because it's hard to fund for 1 year and then cut. It just is. No, that's just my point. Okay, Leo, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a great idea. We looked at all the options, and whatever the board decides, if we keep the $14 million budget, again, we could only do that for 1 year. And after that point, we would have to make cuts, but also we don't have the flexibility in our fund balance to support. We would have to have a decision made of where to go by then. And I think, in my discussions with the county, it's going to take some time. I think, we're going to have to continue to educate, come up with collaborative solutions, and I'm not sure that'll happen in a year. So we put ourselves a little bit at risk by doing it that way versus, again, we have all worked hard at trying to educate the county board and county administration on the needs of the community, and that we have been flat funded for years and years and years where the demand and the costs have increased. It's the last thing that I know we want to do, but we have looked at the numbers and we don't see any other way until we can come up with another solution in our budget that is more sustainable and can add to it. So that's a dilemma. Again, I think the providers and the community have done a great job in the county in getting us into this model, but we weren't expecting to be at such a low end, and we just need to plan for the future.
There you go, Lindsay.
Me again. I've always said that my biggest goal on this board is to maintain amazing services. I'll always start by making sure we maintain. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing when we use a word like we're going to flat fund across the board. I don't want to pigeonhole certain things. I'm going to call out one of our funded agencies, New Directions. For example, they've got a capital funding request. They also lost a grant that funded a program that will ultimately mean a reduction in services, right? So they're an interesting one for me, right? Because they're one and done with a capital project that, you know, is mostly funded with other funding sources. They're looking for that last, you know, boost of support. And those are the kinds of things I want to support with our reserve funds or our overlap dollars, because it is one time. At the same time, I don't want to flat fund a program to whatever we did last time, knowing that that is just not adequate based on other lost revenue streams. So I just want to make sure with the semantics that we're talking about tonight, we could call it flat funding. I want to make sure the same level of services is provided. And that might mean taking, you know, a closer look at certain people in this binder, right? And exactly what we know. Because I don't want to reduce services. I don't want to see, you know, healthcare service professionals lose their jobs, lose their roles, and lose progress. So they're the first one that comes to my mind, but I know we've got a couple of others, you know. We've got Home of the Sparrow, who, you know, had our money, didn't have our money, wants the money. It's like there's a story behind that, and it's like, did they survive just for a year, and is it gonna just die if we don't infuse it? And I don't know the answers to those kinds of questions, and quite honestly, I didn't think I needed to know the answers when we asked for special meetings. So I feel a little bit like there's a new set of questions sometimes that I have that I didn't have when we set those meetings. But those are important things, and you know, if staff knows those things, if you have that information, I hope to have that, because those will be questions I have tomorrow, and if you don't have it, you don't have it, you know?
Ask away.
Yeah, does that make sense? Like, for me, I don't know what we're talking about when you say, today we need to make a decision about flat funding a budget. I'm not looking, you know, I want to make sure tomorrow we maintain what we have and maybe look for any opportunity to do more with, you know, a short-term understanding that it's not coming again maybe in the future.
I think that's what we all want. Unless I've misread somebody here. I think we all want. It's just making you aware, I think, of what's going on, the money we got. And when we say flat funding, it's confusing to me. It means at least funding them, the good programs, to the level they were. And, you know, maybe not more, but like Chris and you've said, come back. Once we know, maybe by January, come back. Our whole job as being on this board is to bring money in and give money out and support the agencies. And I know that we all want to do that.
And Connie?
Yes.
For educational purposes too, you know, observing the county board process, I know option number 4, I don't think is a good option.
No.
In many ways. I mean, when you look at reducing county program-funded programs like our specialty courts or police social work program, I mean, they're part of our network. Yes, they're county, but I think it also does pit us versus them, and I know that's not what it was meant to do.
It was
We're
just an
just looking
option.
as an option to find, but I know for a fact, in going through the county budget process, that they don't have $542,000 to support both of those two programs. Or it was actually 724 was the request that, 724,000 was the request that we had in our $14 million budget for those two programs. I mean, that puts the county board and the county in a difficult place at the 11th hour as well. And so I wasn't supportive of that piece, but I do think that we can come up with some solutions.
Okay. I think that, oh, Mike, you want to talk again? Okay, just a second. Just a second. I have to bring you up. Okay, there.
I'm still sitting here thinking, if this was the other way around, what would happen if we shorted the county several $1 million? What would happen to the people that did that? It was a mistake, it was unintentional that we weren't told, or that they didn't include it, but it was also a screw-up. And somebody needs to be responsible for that, and I think we need a subcommittee that deals with them and works us out of this. And I know we gotta get the budget first, but
The allocations first.
Yeah, the allocations first, but I'm just, in the private world, you'd be out of here so fast. I don't know what to say. Somebody dropped the ball. And it wasn't us. Does everybody else feel that way?
Ray, do you want to hit your button so I can bring you up? Okay.
So as a matter of record, I'd like to know who discovered this, when it was discovered, that the RX and the vehicles.
I discovered it. I've been going in, we knew that our July sales tax would be coming in October. And I've been anxious to see what that is, especially since we're going into the allocation decision-making. So I discovered it on Tuesday, that it seemed short. I contacted county administration, and they said, go ahead and contact the Illinois Department of Revenue, which I've never had any correspondence with them until Tuesday night through Wednesday. And that's when they informed me that, because I was trying to understand from what the county had projected between the CTS tax and the RTA tax that they thought we'd be between, I was trying to understand why it wasn't. So I kept asking questions, because this was back and forth on email. And basically, finally asked that question, what's the difference and why isn't it between? He said, no, you'll always be below the CST tax because it doesn't have the vehicle sales in it. So that's when, it was Wednesday of last week that I discovered.
So again, from an accountability standpoint, I'm putting my auditor's hat on. Have we had any conversation with the county finance group with regard to this? Because I'm assuming that the treasurer's office would be tracking the sales taxes, would have these projections, and it's surprising to me that you're the one that discovered it. I would have thought that there's someone with a master sheet with the sales tax revenues tracking this to make sure that it,
That is my point.
that, meets the targeted or approaches the targeted goals that they were stating to us earlier.
I
I don't
I
have an
mean,
answer to
kudos
that.
that you discovered it. I mean, if you didn't discover it, just imagine what would have happened if we had
With
our
the
meeting.
$14 million budget.
If we
yeah.
had our meeting after.
I think, this is just my opinion, I think it's both our responsibilities. I think it's the counties, but we should have checked on it way back when too. I mean, that's just my thoughts. Yes, Carolyn?
And I can add to that as to kind of how it unfolded as the county board liaison. So it's really nobody's fault, I'll say, and it's not like anyone discovered it from the standpoint, I mean, there are numbers that came in now. And really, historically, what happened is the public safety tax, which they were implementing, the referendum was shifting from property tax to that 0.25% public safety tax, has not been utilized in the county before. So to know what numbers exactly, you get sales tax numbers, and you get the RTA sales tax, you know what it includes. You get the vehicle sales tax or the car sales tax, you know what that includes. But we haven't had the number of what that public safety tax has included. So all along, it was made very clear that they were estimate projections of, and it had said, and there was error in assuming what was included in what, because again, the county doesn't have this tax that exists. And in all honesty, it's fairly rare, even across the state. There's not a whole lot of counties that do have it across the state. And it's evolving. It's a new method by which people are using because mental health boards are becoming more prevalent in different communities. And so this is a mechanism by which people are using. So it is a fairly new and a fairly unknown territory. Now, that being said, the Department of Revenue does have those numbers, and I think it was just lack of awareness that people knew that they had and could have projected for us what that estimation would have been. And nobody thought to go to the Department of Revenue. And I think just because, again, it was a very new concept of shifting this tax, and it was different than anything that they have done before. So it's, I don't want to really say it was anyone's fault. It was lack of knowledge on everyone's part. It was well-intended from the standpoint of, again, I will reiterate that they were trying to empower voters to make the decision if they wanted to shift it from a somewhat controversial, I will even venture into saying political property tax at times, into a more standard, sales tax that just would exist as is and not introduce any sort of annual debate into it. So I think that was the reason, and at the same time, giving them a different tool. I mean, there were many different areas and different sides of it, but just, I think it was just lack of knowledge in general on many people's parts. And there were several different iterations of projections that were made from various individuals. And no matter who you talk to, everyone said, it is unknown, we are guessing it's gonna fall in here. And they were knowingly guesses because there is nothing that currently existed. So I don't wanna say that, it's somebody's fault or it's the county's fault or it's, but Connie's right, we too, as the mental health board, could have called the Department of Revenue as well. I mean, it wasn't anyone, it was ultimately to the people. So any general public could have called as well. It's very, very unfortunate. It really, really is. But it was a referendum, and I will again state that on the positive side, moving forward, we have complete control. So I will continue to say, we know where we're gonna be. Once this year goes, we will know what that 0.25% is, and we will be able to have those projections, and we will not have to go back year after year to the county board, keep our fingers crossed, and hope that, we get what we need, because we will know where we are.
You have to hit your button, Mike. Oh, okay.
Looks like Ray said.
I agree, Carolyn, with some of what you said, but the county is the one that deals with sales tax, has dealt with it. Somebody had to know on a $14 million budget that the car sales were not going to be included. That's a pretty big omission, and had we known that, I'm pretty sure we would have done things differently, come up with a hybrid system. But because that wasn't discovered or known or slipped through the cracks, I just feel like it was a bait and switch. It really feels that way to me. I mean, we don't normally deal with that end of the funding. That's usually the county board. And they're the numbers people. They've been dealing with sales tax all along. They certainly knew that automobile sales tax wouldn't be under our ability to be taxed. That's what that's where I want, I think that there's some ownership that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
I know, we're off.
I think we need to move on
Here, let
here.
Ray-
I just want to
Okay,
say.
Ray, go ahead.
I'm not looking at assigning blame or anything.
Okay, but
What
I
I'm
think we
looking-
need to just move
What
on.
I'm looking for is, for the future, when we have these situations, do we have financial controls and governance so that, like we were all saying here, we could have approached the Illinois Department of Revenue, put that on our accounting team and such, and our finance committee and such, that in the future, we delve much more deeply. I think, again, I understand where Mike's coming from, that, it's the county government, it's a mystery where some of these funds come from, where they go, what they're called and such. I think it behooves us all to, make a point of focusing in the future so this doesn't happen again.
Well, I think what we have right before us is we know what we're getting. We will be looking at our allocations tomorrow night. The decision will be whether you're going to add more programs than the budget or the, not budget, the allocations, I keep saying budget, allocations is. So we can beat a dead horse tonight. We are all upset we're getting less money, but what are we going to do with it? And we need to move on because we've been discussing this for over an hour.
Yeah. And Connie.
Okay, Leo.
And just to summarize, what I've heard is, it sounds like we probably need to talk through it tomorrow as well, but from what I hear is the flat funding with flexibility. So that we're looking at, the flat funding, but with flexibility to make some changes. Again, when we look at the flat funding, we were at 9.5 million for client services last year. And that's what we'd be looking at, knowing that, again, overall, we're getting 10 million in fiscal year '25. So anything above that is going to be from our fund balance, which is fine. We're able, if we go that route, which it sounds like, the flat funding with flexibility tomorrow, is that you do have the ability to, if you want to bring in a new program or you want to add something, it's just that we don't have the budget to go much beyond that. And the other thing I'm
Use it
hearing
all.
is communicating with the county board regarding the situation and working towards a solution for the future. So those are the two things that I'm hearing, two main things.
Yeah, I think that's, that we do have the flexibility. We can bring on some programs. We just don't want to spend it all. But I agree that we be able to bring in people whenever we need to. Do our attorneys have anything to say? No? Okay.
Is there-
Amy,
Is
you
there
have a
any-
question? Okay, go ahead, Amy. Oh, boy. What?
You might not be able to answer this. Have we heard from providers? Like, has anyone magically come in and said, you know what, cross this off? Or have we gotten any reaction other than the general reaction we're all experiencing of, oh, wow, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, our provider community has been wonderful. They were the advocacy group. They went out and helped sell this. I think they're just as disappointed as we all are in this, but they're a wonderful group and have banded together and we're in this together. And I've heard from them and they're supportive of the directions we're going and any assistance that, we may need. So we did communicate to the network and
Some of the requests, like new directions, is this year. So
And
I'm
that's more
just-
of an emergency,
Right,
a
right.
situation. So we haven't heard of any other major emergency situations. And I also have heard from one provider saying, I understand where we're at and we'll be okay with the flat funding. So there's just a great deal of collaboration with our providers, but also knowing that, we're all in this together and that we are looking for solutions for the future.
I'm going to call point of order because we've been going on this for an hour.
I was going to make a suggestion for tomorrow.
Okay,
And we kind of did it last year, but it might be easier just for tomorrow, since there's going to be obviously a lot of discussion, if we could just go in the order of, like that spreadsheet. I don't know, I used to do hotel motel tax dollars, and what we would do is we just go through each one and kind of get a quick number as to where everyone was thinking, and we can have that discussion, and then you kind of get your bottom and you see where you're at. So, if you want to start with flat funding, or if you want to start with the full funding, just kind of get those quick numbers, or if you want to take out the new funding, it gives you an idea of where you're at.
I'll tell you what I plan on doing. So
Okay.
I plan on going through the different programs, like the court programs. And if you agree with what was suggested to fund, we'll move on. If you want to pull out a program, we'll pull it out till the end. If you want that, any program that was not funded and you want to fund, we'll pull it out to the end, and we'll see where we're at. I
And if we
plan
could
to
just go in order, like,
go
because I
right
think
in
last year
order.
we were kind of jumping
No,
around a little
I'm
bit. and it
going
helps
right
to
in
go
order.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay, so I think to wrap this up for tonight, you know that we're disappointed. We do have some fund balance. I think we all agree that people can come back, or agencies, whenever they need to. And tomorrow, we will look at our allocations, and I will go through it, and you'll say, pull this one, whatever one you don't like, or you want to add more, whatever, just pull it. Otherwise, we're going to approve, and we're going to sit here I'll go through every single one of them, because we'd be here till 11 o'clock tomorrow night. So that's how I plan on doing it tomorrow.
And then we'll need to have a special budget meeting, unless,
Oh, a
unless,
budget.
unless the board gives us the okay to just
No.
update the budget.
No, you're not doing that without
Right.
board approval. I'm making the decision for all of you.
So we're probably looking at November 6th of a special board meeting that night for the, just for the budget. And that'll be helpful because after you make your decisions with the allocations, then we can go back and relook at the budget and put that together for November 6th.
Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn. You won't be here for what? I'm sorry. Chris? Oh, boy.
Lost it. I just thought maybe we could check quorum on the 6th because I'm not available that night.
Raise your hand if you're available. Raise your hands if you're going to be here.
Raise your hand if you're going to be here, can be here on the 6th.
I'll have Lindsay raise her hand for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had Lindsay raise my hand. Oh, 1, 2. Oh, okay, we have enough for quorum, all right,
Members' comments.
okay. So now can I,
Members' comments.
what?
Members' comments.
Oh, members' comments. Does anybody have any member comment? Okay, then we don't need an executive session for tonight's meeting. I need a motion to adjourn. Thanks, Mike. Second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? See you tomorrow night at 6.